I still remember the exact moment I stepped into the elegantly decorated hall. Every detail of that day is seared into my memory. In those first 100 words, my heart pounded as I absorbed the shock of it all. My brother, with a grin that barely concealed his triumph, was about to publicly announce that Grandpa had left him his vacation home. The air was thick with anticipation, and every whispered conversation seemed to echo, "This is huge." I felt simultaneously exhilarated and betrayed, as if the inheritance was a secret I wasn't meant to share. That day, as I watched our family dynamics shift before my eyes, I realized nothing would ever be the same. I had never expected to be caught in the crossfire of a family revelation like this. For as long as I could remember, my brother and I had been on different paths. While I pursued a steady, modest life filled with routine work and quiet evenings, he had always embraced a more flamboyant, risk-taking lifestyle. Growing up, we'd fought and laughed in equal measure, our rivalry tempered by a shared bond. But the relationship between us had never been entirely harmonious, a mix of admiration, jealousy, and the unspoken competition for Grandpa's favor. It seemed that, in his own way, my brother had always craved validation from our old man, and now, with this shocking announcement, he was finally poised to claim what he believed was rightfully his. That morning, I arrived at his housewarming party with mixed emotions. The invitation had been formal and almost regal in its presentation, a stark contrast to the simple, no-frills gatherings I was accustomed to. The mansion itself was a marvel, tastefully decorated with modern art adorning the walls and soft classical music playing in the background. Guests mingled in finely tailored outfits, discussing the latest in business and lifestyle trends, while a sense of quiet pride and anticipation buzzed in the air. Yet beneath the veneer of celebration, I sensed an undercurrent of tension and expectation. Something big was about to happen, and deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it would change the way our family was perceived forever. My brother, Alex, had always been the golden child in our family, charismatic, daring, and unafraid to take center stage. His relationship with our grandfather had been a complex mix of admiration and defiance. Growing up, I'd watched him scheme and negotiate, always pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable. So when rumors started circulating that Grandpa had left him his beloved vacation home, a sprawling estate by the sea that had been a treasured family retreat for generations, I was stunned, yet not entirely surprised. There was always an element of unpredictability in Alex's approach to life. As I entered the grand living room, I found myself surrounded by relatives, old family friends, and business associates who seemed to be there not just to celebrate a new home, but to witness a new chapter in our family saga. The conversation was animated, filled with speculation and subtle hints. I could hear murmurs like, "Did you hear what Alex mentioned last night? And I can't believe he actually got it." The buzz was infectious, yet I felt a growing disquiet within me, a mixture of jealousy, nostalgia, and an inexplicable sense of injustice. For years, I had contributed quietly to the family legacy. I had worked tirelessly, saved diligently, and made sacrifices that often went unnoticed, all while believing that my efforts were part of the foundation that held our family together. And now, it seemed, all those quiet sacrifices were being swept aside in favor of a flamboyant announcement that was as much about my brother's ambition as it was about Grandpa's final wish. I found a quiet corner near the back of the room, away from the swirling conversation, and tried to steady my thoughts. I recalled memories of simpler times, childhood vacations at Grandpa's old seaside cottage, where we'd laugh and play until the sun dipped below the horizon. Those memories were bittersweet now. They were a reminder of a family that once valued togetherness and simple joys, not the ruthless pursuit of legacy and status. I couldn't help but feel that, in the process of this grand announcement, something essential was being lost, something that money and prestige could never replace. Soon enough, the moment arrived. Alex climbed onto a small stage set up in the foyer, his eyes gleaming with excitement. The room hushed as he took the microphone. With a confident smile, he began to recount stories of our family's past, carefully weaving in anecdotes that highlighted his close relationship with Grandpa and his vision for the future. His words were smooth, persuasive, each sentence calculated to elicit admiration and a tinge of envy from the audience. I listened, heart heavy, as he revealed that Grandpa had indeed left him the vacation home, a gift that, according to him, signified a new beginning for our family. For a moment, I was paralyzed by a complex swirl of emotions. On one hand, I was happy for my brother. On the other, I felt utterly marginalized. My own contributions, the countless years of silent support, suddenly felt invisible in the glare of this public spectacle. I watched as relatives clapped politely, their smiles fixed and somewhat strained, and I wondered if I'd ever be seen as more than a background player in the grand narrative of our family. That day, as I stood in the midst of celebration, I realized that this announcement was not just about a vacation home, it was a declaration of values, a statement about which parts of our family were considered important, and which were, in the eyes of our elders, disposable. When the applause died down and the guests began to disperse into smaller clusters, I felt compelled to confront my own feelings. I wasn't sure if I should leave, but something inside me urged me to stay, to listen, to observe, and to understand the dynamics that had led us to this pivotal moment. I approached a few of the older relatives and asked gentle questions about Grandpa's decision, hoping to find some explanation or, at the very least, some empathy. Their responses were a mix of reluctant admiration for Alex's boldness and a quiet dismissal of any notion that my efforts had mattered. It was a harsh reality to face, and one that left me with a lingering sense of isolation. That evening, after the party began to wind down and the revelers retreated to quieter corners of conversation, I found myself alone on the terrace, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. The cool breeze brushed against my skin, and for a long while, I just sat there, lost in thought. I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point, years of hard work, dreams nurtured in silence, and the realization that sometimes, family can be as unforgiving as it is cherished. I wondered if this public announcement was a turning point for our entire family or just another chapter in a long, painful saga of favoritism and neglect. In that moment, as I faced the reality of my own diminished role within the family, I vowed to myself that I would not let this setback define my future. I resolved that I would channel my pain into building a life that reflected my true values, a life where my contributions were recognized, where love and respect were not conditional on wealth or status. I promised myself that I would work tirelessly to prove that there was more to our family than just the grand gestures and the loud declarations, that the quiet sacrifices and the everyday acts of love were just as vital, if not more so. As the night deepened, I returned to the warmth of the main hall, where conversation still bubbled softly and the glow of candlelight illuminated faces filled with complex emotions. I mingled with a few friends, sharing quiet, candid remarks about the evening's events. Each word, each nod of understanding, felt like a small affirmation that I was not alone in my feelings. There were others, too, who had long harbored doubts about the direction our family was taking, a subtle, collective discontent that resonated in hushed whispers and lingering glances. By the time the party officially ended, I left with a heavy heart but a determined mind. I knew that this was not the end of my story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would have to navigate the turbulent waters of familial expectations and personal integrity. I was aware that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, rebuilding relationships, confronting painful truths, and finding a way to honor my own journey. Yet, I also felt a spark of hope, a belief that, despite the harshness of the day, I had the strength to redefine what family meant to me. That night, as I lay in bed, the echoes of the celebration and the bittersweet notes of that pivotal announcement still rang in my ears. I resolved to take control of my own destiny. I realized that while I couldn't change the past or force my parents to see my worth, I could build a future where my voice was heard and my efforts valued. And so, with the stars twinkling outside my window, I began to plan for a life defined not by others' shallow judgments, but by my own truth, a future where every sacrifice, every quiet moment of hard work, would contribute to a legacy that was wholly and unapologetically mine. In the days following that fateful family confrontation, I found myself adrift in a swirling mix of emotions, a potent cocktail of hurt, anger, and a slowly emerging resolve. I couldn't help but feel that the rejection I experienced wasn't just a single moment of unfairness, it was the culmination of years of unnoticed sacrifices and quiet persistence, all dismissed with the cold phrase, "I'm your mom, shut up." That morning's decision, to gift our family home to my spoiled sister, felt like a calculated erasure of my contributions, a brutal reminder that in our family, loyalty and hard work could be easily overlooked when it came to favoritism. In the immediate aftermath, I retreated to a quiet corner of my life. I moved into a modest apartment far from the old family home, a physical and emotional sanctuary where I could process everything without the constant reminders of what I had lost. The new place was unassuming, yet it quickly became a blank canvas for rebuilding my identity. Every box I unpacked, every picture I hung, served as a silent testament to my resilience. I spent long hours sitting by the window, watching the city's bustle below, while my thoughts spiraled into questions I'd long avoided. Why did my efforts mean so little to them? Was I truly invisible? I began journaling with a ferocity I hadn't known I possessed. Each page became a refuge for my raw emotions, lines of anger mingled with introspection, memories of childhood family vacations at the old house merging with the bitter taste of betrayal. I wrote about the countless nights I'd spent working extra shifts to help pay the mortgage, and how every penny, every sacrifice, had been my way of investing in a shared future. Now, seeing it all dismissed in an instant, I couldn't help but feel both devastated and determined. I resolved to reclaim my self-worth not by seeking validation from those who had hurt me, but by defining it on my own terms. The isolation that followed was intense. I deliberately cut off most contact with my parents and even distanced myself from relatives who seemed complicit in their favoritism. I couldn't bear the thought of hearing their justifications or witnessing their smug satisfaction as my sister basked in the glow of her newfound privilege. Instead, I sought solace in the company of old friends, people who had seen me at my best and worst, who understood that my value wasn't measured in dollars or grand gestures. We'd meet at quiet cafes or take long walks through the park, sharing stories of personal setbacks and the small triumphs that helped us move forward. Their support became a crucial lifeline, reaffirming that genuine relationships are built on respect and understanding, not on material inheritance. With time, I realized that the path to healing was not about wallowing in self-pity but about active transformation. I enrolled in therapy sessions with a compassionate counselor, Ms. Rivera, who specialized in family dynamics and personal resilience. Our sessions were raw and challenging, forcing me to confront the deep-seated wounds left by years of unrecognized effort. She helped me untangle the web of emotions, teaching me that the dismissal I experienced was more a reflection of their own limitations than a verdict on my worth. Slowly, I began to see that my self-respect wasn't tied to their approval, it was something I had to nurture from within. We spent hours discussing concepts like boundaries, self-care, and the importance of forgiveness, not for them, but for my own peace of mind. These conversations gradually instilled in me the belief that letting go of the past was the only way to truly move forward. Parallel to my emotional healing, I started exploring new interests and reigniting old passions. I dusted off my guitar, an instrument I'd once used to escape into music on lazy summer afternoons, and started playing again. The act of strumming familiar chords and writing simple melodies became a cathartic outlet for my sorrow and anger. I even composed a few songs about the betrayal and the quiet determination that followed, finding that music allowed me to express emotions that words alone could not capture. On weekends, I'd perform at local open mic nights, each performance a declaration that I wasn't defined by their shallow dismissal. It was liberating to share my story through song, to see strangers nod in empathy, and to realize that there was beauty even in heartbreak. Work, too, became a sanctuary of sorts, a realm where I could channel my frustrations into productivity. I had been diligent and reliable for years, contributing my share to the family's financial burdens. Now, free from the shadow of familial injustice, I threw myself into my job with renewed vigor. I took on additional responsibilities, tackled challenging projects, and began to see that my professional contributions were recognized by colleagues who valued my skills and commitment. Every successful project, every compliment from a coworker, felt like a small victory, a reaffirmation that my hard work was meaningful even if it wasn't celebrated by those closest to me. At the same time, I started to plan alternative family outings with my children, determined to create new memories that weren't overshadowed by the bitterness of exclusion. We'd take weekend trips to local parks, visit museums, or simply have picnics on sunny afternoons. These simple, heartfelt moments reminded me that the essence of family lies not in grand displays or opulent settings, but in the quiet, everyday acts of love and care. My kids, with their unfiltered joy and resilient spirits, became my anchor, constant reminders that true legacy is measured in the bonds we nurture, not in the possessions we inherit. Socially, I gradually rebuilt my network. I attended support groups for parents who'd experienced similar familial betrayals and discovered a community of people who understood the pain of being undervalued. In these groups, I listened to others share their stories of overcoming neglect and learned that many had found strength in reclaiming their narratives. We exchanged ideas about self-care, discussed strategies for setting healthy boundaries, and offered each other encouragement during moments of self-doubt. These gatherings weren't just therapeutic, they were transformative. They taught me that while the wounds of rejection might never fully disappear, they could be healed with time, empathy, and the willingness to seek help. I also reconnected with distant relatives and childhood friends who had always seen me as more than just a silent contributor. Their kind words and genuine concern were like rays of light breaking through the clouds of despair. One cousin, in particular, told me, "You've always been the one who carried the weight of our family with quiet strength. I've always admired you, even if no one else did." That affirmation meant more than I can express. It reinforced my belief that my efforts had not been in vain, and that my true worth was recognized by those who mattered most. In the midst of this personal and emotional reconstruction, I began to consider my future more deliberately. I enrolled in online courses to further my education and to update my professional skills. I attended seminars on entrepreneurship, driven by the realization that I had the capacity to forge my own path, independent of the family legacy that had once confined me. With every new skill I acquired, every new connection I made, I felt a small piece of my shattered identity being reassembled into something stronger and more self-assured. I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I had the power to shape my future through my own choices and actions. My nights were often spent in quiet reflection, sitting by the window with a cup of herbal tea, watching the stars and pondering the complexities of fate and family. In those moments of solitude, I allowed myself to grieve, not just for the loss of the home, but for the loss of the trust and support I had once taken for granted. I wrote letters to my younger self, reminders of the dreams I had once nurtured and the resilience I had always possessed. I made lists of goals, both personal and professional, that I wanted to achieve in the coming months. These exercises were more than just therapeutic rituals. They were blueprints for a future that I was determined to build, one where my worth was defined by my own vision and not by the arbitrary judgments of others. Slowly, the heavy burden of betrayal began to lift. The more I invested in myself, the more I discovered that I was not the invisible, unappreciated contributor I'd been made out to be. I saw that my life, though simple and unadorned by lavish displays, was rich with meaning and potential. The very qualities I had once considered liabilities, my modest lifestyle, my quiet dedication, turned out to be the foundations of genuine strength and authenticity. I learned to celebrate the beauty of a simple life, to find joy in small victories, and to appreciate the love and laughter shared with my children and true friends. By the end of this phase, I reached a turning point, a moment of clarity where I realized that my past, with all its pain and injustice, had prepared me for a future of independent growth and fulfillment. I had redefined my relationship with my family, setting firm boundaries and learning to let go of the need for their approval. I had embraced my own worth and discovered that true legacy isn't measured in material possessions or familial favoritism, but in the quiet triumphs of living authentically and with purpose. As I look back on those tumultuous months, I see them as the crucible that forged a stronger, wiser version of myself. Every tear, every moment of anger, every small step forward has led me to this place of renewed confidence. I now stand on the threshold of a future that I am actively creating, one where my dreams are nurtured, my efforts valued, and my voice heard. The journey through solitude and self-discovery was painful, but it was also liberating. I realized that I have the power to rebuild my life on my own terms, and that sometimes, the hardest breaks are the ones that set you free. The morning after I finalized cutting off toxic ties with my parents marked the dawn of a life unburdened by past betrayals, a fresh start that felt both exhilarating and deeply resolute. I woke up to a quiet sunrise streaming through the window of my modest apartment, the soft light symbolizing hope and renewal. In that early hour, I realized that despite the bitter sting of exclusion and favoritism, I was finally free to define my own worth. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night spent worrying over the family trip that I was unjustly barred from while my sister's kids basked in luxury, had led me to this very moment, the decision to reclaim my life and rebuild my legacy from the ground up. In the weeks that followed my decisive break, I immersed myself in the process of healing and self-discovery. I reconnected with the passions that once nourished me, reading, writing, and the simple pleasure of cooking meals for my children on lazy weekends. I began each day with a quiet ritual, a hot cup of coffee, a few moments of meditation to center my thoughts, and a walk through the nearby park. The routine reminded me that, although my past had been marred by family rejection, the future was mine to shape. I started journaling every morning, pouring out my frustrations, hopes, and reflections as I slowly learned that my worth was intrinsic, independent of anyone's approval. I realized that the painful memories of being dismissed, of hearing that callous "I'm your mom, shut up," weren't a measure of my inadequacy, but rather the catalyst that pushed me to forge a stronger, more resilient self. Embracing this newfound freedom wasn't an overnight transformation, it was a gradual process marked by setbacks, breakthroughs, and moments of profound clarity. I enrolled in personal development workshops and therapy sessions where I confronted the deeply ingrained insecurities that had taken root over years of unrecognized effort. My therapist, Ms. Rivera, gently guided me through exercises in self-compassion and boundary setting, teaching me that forgiveness, especially for oneself, is essential for growth. I learned to release the anger and sadness that had once threatened to weigh me down, understanding that every wound was, in its own way, a lesson. Each day, I slowly began to let go of the bitterness, replacing it with a determination to build a future that celebrated genuine love, integrity, and authenticity. At work, I took on new challenges with a vigor that surprised even me. I had always been the quiet, dependable one, the person who toiled in the background to keep the family legacy afloat. Now, free from the toxic comparisons and favoritism that had defined my past, I rediscovered my professional identity. I began to seek out projects that aligned with my passions, exploring opportunities that not only utilized my skills but also allowed me to innovate on my own terms. I enrolled in online courses to update my skill set, networked with professionals who valued creativity over conformity, and even started a side venture that merged my love of travel with sustainable living. Every small success at work, every compliment from a colleague, reinforced a powerful truth. My worth was not defined by the dismissive actions of my family, but by my own dedication, talent, and hard work. Socially, I reconnected with old friends and forged new relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care. I attended community gatherings, joined book clubs, and even volunteered at local shelters. In these interactions, I found a sense of belonging that had been absent for so long, a realization that true family extends far beyond bloodlines. I discovered that there were people out there who saw me for who I was, a kind, resilient person with a quiet strength that shone brightest when tested by adversity. Sharing my journey with them, I felt less isolated. Instead, I felt part of a larger, supportive community that helped me rebuild my self-esteem, one genuine conversation at a time. One particularly transformative moment occurred at a local seminar on resilience and personal growth, where I was invited to share my story. Standing on a modest stage in a warmly lit auditorium, I spoke about the day I learned that my years of sacrifice had been casually dismissed. I described the gut-wrenching moment when my mother's harsh words echoed through the hall, and how that single act of favoritism forced me to reevaluate everything I believed about family and self-worth. As I recounted my journey, from the depths of despair to the gradual process of rebuilding, I saw nods of empathy and felt the energy of shared understanding in the room. That experience was a turning point, a public affirmation that my struggles were not in vain, and that by embracing my true self, I could inspire others to do the same. As summer gave way to a vibrant fall, I continued to nurture my newfound sense of self. I transformed my living space into a sanctuary filled with personal touches, photos of happy moments with my children, artwork that resonated with my journey, and books that challenged and inspired me. Each corner of my apartment reminded me that I was building something uniquely mine, a haven where my children could grow up surrounded by love and authenticity. I began hosting small gatherings for close friends and supportive relatives, sharing home-cooked meals and honest conversations about life, loss, and hope. These intimate moments became the foundation upon which I rebuilt my sense of family, one that wasn't dictated by the whims of my parents but chosen by me. I also began to explore creative projects that allowed me to process my past and shape my future. I started writing a memoir, a candid account of the trials I had endured and the lessons I had learned along the way. It wasn't just a story of betrayal or heartbreak, it was a testament to the strength that emerges when you refuse to be defined by others' shortcomings. With every chapter, I relived moments of pain and joy, weaving them together into a narrative that was both raw and hopeful. Writing became a therapeutic exercise, a way to reclaim my voice and affirm that my life had meaning beyond the dismissals and rejections that had once plagued me. The more I wrote, the more I discovered about myself. I learned that resilience isn't about never falling, it's about rising each time you do, stronger and more determined than before. I began to see that the scars from my past were not flaws, but badges of honor that marked my journey through hardship. Each setback had taught me valuable lessons about love, sacrifice, and the importance of self-respect. And with every lesson, I felt my inner strength grow, transforming the pain of rejection into a powerful drive to succeed on my own terms. In time, I also started to mend the relationship with those few family members who had always seen my worth, even if it wasn't echoed by our parents. I reconnected with cousins who had never sided with favoritism and forged bonds with friends who were steadfast in their belief that love and loyalty should be unconditional. Through heartfelt conversations and shared experiences, I learned that while I couldn't change the past, I could choose which relationships to nurture and which to let go. I gradually distanced myself from those whose judgment had once defined me and embraced the love of those who celebrated my authenticity. Now, as I look back on the journey that brought me from the depths of betrayal to the threshold of a new future, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. I'm no longer the person who quietly bore the weight of unrecognized sacrifices. I've learned that true family is built on mutual respect, that self-worth comes from within, and that every painful experience holds the potential for growth. I stand today, not as a victim of my circumstances, but as someone who has risen above them, someone who has reclaimed her identity and is forging a future based on strength, love, and authenticity. Every morning, when I wake up to a new day filled with possibilities, I am reminded that my past does not define me. It has shaped me, yes, but it does not determine my destiny. I have built a life that honors my values, nurtures my relationships, and supports my dreams. I've learned to embrace the simple joys of everyday living, to find beauty in the quiet moments, and to celebrate the victories, no matter how small, they bring. My journey is far from over. I know there will be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and sorrow. But I also know that I have the resilience to face them, the wisdom to learn from them, and the courage to continue building a life that is uniquely, unapologetically mine. So here I stand, at the crossroads of yesterday and tomorrow, with a heart that has been scarred yet emboldened by the trials of the past. I have chosen to cut off the toxic ties that once held me back, and I am now focused on cultivating a future where my worth is defined by my own actions and not by the shallow judgments of others. I am building my legacy one day at a time, a legacy rooted in honesty, perseverance, and the belief that every ending is just the start of a new beginning. As I close this chapter and look forward to the unfolding story of my life, I do so with quiet confidence and a steadfast resolve to live on my own terms. I am no longer confined by the dismissive words of those who once took my efforts for granted. Instead, I carry with me the lessons of the past, a deep understanding that true strength comes from within, and that the power to create a better future lies in the choices I make every single day. I am, at last, the author of my own destiny, and I look forward to writing many more chapters filled with hope, love, and the unyielding pursuit of a life that is truly my own.